legalizefreedom.com. Why are we here? Where do we come from? Where are we going? From the nature of reality to the future of humanity. Listen without limits. Unchain your brain. Change your thinking. Change your life. legalizefreedom.com.
Greetings and welcome once again to legalizefreedom.com. I'm your host Greg Moffat, and today we present part 2 of our interview with David Ditchfield, discussing his book, Shine On, the remarkable story of how I fell under a speeding train, journeyed to the afterlife, and the astonishing proof I brought back with me. In the second part, we explore David's near-death experience in more detail, the overlap such experiences have with psychic phenomena and altered states of consciousness, and the potential implications for the survival of our species and our understanding of the nature of reality itself. Personal transformation aside, the most profound way in which near-death experiences affect wider society and the source of their positive potential for our future is in how they change attitudes and behaviour towards others and towards the planet as a whole. Losing one's fear of death, discovering a vibrant new zest for life, abandoning attachment to material things and striving to help others can create ripple effects with potentially global reach. Even simply reading about near-death experiences can generate these transformative effects in individuals. Given the possibility of a species-wide near-death experience in the shape of social and environmental collapse, are we being impelled to evolve or die? Hello and welcome, David, and thank you so much for joining us again on legalizefreedom.com.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Great to be back, Greg.
Now, David, today we're doing a follow-up interview to one that we conducted just only a few weeks ago, and we were talking about what happened to you, an amazing thing that happened to you, a near-death experience that you had, and this is chronicled in your book, which was recently published, and that's called Shine On, the remarkable story of how I fell under a speeding train, journeyed to the afterlife, and the astonishing proof I brought back with me. Now, if listeners haven't heard that, I recommend that they do. There we talk a great deal about your life before your near-death experience and how it was transformed after that. But today we're really going to talk about the actual experience itself. Now, of course, I'm going to ask you to begin describing aspects to this, and the whole point is that these things are quite ineffable, really, and they defy description. And this indeed is why you've begun to try and express elements of your experience in other ways, through your painting and the music, something that you did not display any proclivity for prior to that. Mm-hmm. But perhaps we could get started with a common theme or a common comment that's made about near-death experiences by those who undergo them, and that is that they seem more real than reality itself, or the 3D reality that we consider all that there is. So maybe I could get your take on that, and this is sort of a general comment about the whole episode, really, and how that felt to you, in terms of its quality, regarding how you feel now, sitting wherever you are, talking to me across the internet.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's very interesting, because that's exactly how I feel about it. That the whole experience itself was, I would describe it as ultra real, and because it was just so sort of, it wasn't like, I was fully aware of myself and being in my own body, but it was also most certainly a different sphere altogether, and I was fully aware of that fact. The one thing that was very striking to me that I noticed straight away, that I'd lost all sense of all the baggage that I'd been carrying around with me, the emotional baggage that I'd been carrying throughout the past, and it had gone instantly. All the sensation of guilt, which was like a big thing for me, had gone. And I would describe it as being, for the first time in my life, actually being in the moment, as it were. I wasn't thinking about the past. And I wasn't thinking about the future either. Whereas my life before, that's what it was all based about. You know, it was just like feeling like the past was always like there haunting me and worrying about my future, where it was all going to go. But all that had dispersed. So I would say that there was a sense of, being in a completely different place, but also being completely in touch with my soul, if you like. Yeah.
Well, this is very much borne out when people who are experiencing difficulties in their life and perhaps seek some help with it, or indeed you could say it describes a general condition of many of us, is that we are kind of like lost in the past and the future and never really present where we are right now.
That's right, yeah.
And that's, that all there really is the present moment. And that's not to say don't plan for the future, but it's so common. I mean, Eckhart Tolle's whole model really of how to live is built on this idea that, that the past is gone and that the future never arrives really. And that, so you're kind of, reality is being created as you go. And, it can be very powerful. And for you to experience it in such a way, it certainly, would you say it lightened you in terms of load, in terms of how you view life now? That's certainly how it comes across in your book.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. I mean, when I'd come back, as it were, into my own body, it was very apparent to me that I'd still got that sensation. It was very powerful running through me, and throughout my recovery time in hospital, even though I was physically in a very, very bad way, both family and friends would come in and comment on me on just how right I seemed. My mother said that I was glowing. She would describe me as glowing whenever she walked into the room, and she said that even though I could hardly move, it was like I was radiating this kind of sense of warmth and help towards people around me, even the nurses, And I think it's because I just felt so great about myself that I just wanted to spread that love, And so it's certainly stayed with me, throughout my life. I mean, obviously there's moments when it's not like that all the time. I'm not superhuman. I haven't come back with these kind of superhuman powers, So, there's times when life has challenged me so much, but then I have to just stop and think about it, remember that moment and go back to it. But the interesting thing is that I would have never thought about any of these aspects at all before in my life. Before I was literally skimming the surface, as it were, and, I was just like never really dealing with that idea, that notion of being in the moment. And so, it was a very profound change for me.
It also reminds us of another important lesson, that many of us, our minds are never still. There's always thoughts are churning up, emotions are churning up, and it's constant. Now, sometimes this is positive. You might be thinking about what you're going to have for dinner or about an upcoming holiday you've got, but equally it could be very negative things, often is. And you could be feeling emotions around those thoughts, positive and negative. But what you experience, again, reminds us that those thoughts and emotions are not us. Many people feel defined not only by their life situation, but by what they think they are, which is what they feel. And you were kind of blasted outside of that for a short time as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would say that before, like I would take too much on, I was very sort of, I'd only have to have a passing comment from a stranger in the street or in a supermarket or something like that, just if it was a negative one, it would just stick, and I'd take it so seriously, and so it's like my mind was just like this constant traffic of information that was not all, it was a mess. It was like Spaghetti Junction in Birmingham, rather than like this straight flowing highway of ideas. Because it is sometimes, if it's good to have a busy mind, but as long as that busy mind is actually sort of controlled and it's all going in and it's all going in neat directions, as it were, whereas mine wasn't. So
what's very striking for me as well, having also read a lot about dreams and about psychedelic experiences, psychedelic drug experiences, is the commonalities. Now, that's a whole show in itself, really. But not having experienced anything like you have, but I have had dreams. We all dream. We all know how strange they can be, and they can be very pleasant, very unpleasant. Often as not, they're just strange. I've also had psychedelic experiences personally a few times, enough to get a handle on the experience, so that if I'm talking to someone, like I recently did with Christopher Bache, people can find that's a recent show that I did. He's basically, his life's work has been exploring that side of reality. But I don't know about the latter. I don't want to probe into your personal life too much. But as far as dreams go, at the very least, did you feel it had dreamlike qualities? Because when you read in your book the description of your actual experience, it sounds like you're talking about a dream.
Ah, interesting. Yeah, there's a absolute difference in my mind, and most other people who've had near-death experiences will say that you know that it's not a dream, because even though I say it was like another realm, it was incredibly real, and it was as real as you and I are just sat talking now, even though it's over the internet. We know that it's happening. We know that we are both sat in our own apartments or our homes chatting to each other, and dreams are more, dreams are more chaotic and bizarre. And not only that, dreams can change as well in your memory. When you record a dream back, you think about it, and the time sort of elements sort of changes with that dream, and they don't stay with you for that long. This, near-death experiences, funny enough, when I came back from the near-death experience, I was so worried. I went straight into theatre, and I was under anaesthetic for eight hours. And when I came through, I was just kind of scared that I was going to forget everything that had happened. And I thought, I've got to tell the world about this. So I need to know, I need to record it, which is, I know now that I've never forgotten a single element of it. And that, as I say, that kind of ultra real and logical element to it all has just stayed with me and has never shifted or changed. It's funny, if I talk to people now, or in fact people I know who've known me for some time, when they've heard some of the interviews back, they say, that's really interesting. When I heard your description of your near-death experience, it's like nothing has changed you haven't sort of suddenly said, well, this happened now, then I was there. Yet everyone says it's very sort of, that the story is very consistent, if you like.
Well, that's interesting, given the point we made about it being more real than reality, because we all have, whether we're aware of it or not, recounted so-called actual events and people in our lives incorrectly. A bit like when maybe a group of people are recalling something, perhaps something they did together. Oh yeah, do you remember that night we were at the the bar and
I know.
And Bob spilt that red wine down his new shirt, and that pink one. It wasn't a pink shirt; it was a white shirt. No, it was definitely pink, and that can actually go into like much more significant aspects of reality. I don't know if you've heard of the Mandela Effect. This is basically, it's named after Nelson Mandela, and it was a phenomenon experienced by a lot of people around the world, and the internet has allowed people to come together and share experiences in a way that was difficult beforehand or would take a lot longer. And when Nelson Mandela's death was announced, a significant number of people, basically came forward in various ways and said, but he's already dead. And I go, well, he's not. He's just died. Don't be silly. But there were a significant number of people who were absolutely convinced that Nelson Mandela had died, and it's called the Mandela Effect. They have an experience, and they have it in common. I say it's not just one person. And somebody else will say, yeah, I'm sure I read about his death in the paper. And it's just interesting. Why is that happening? Now, for example, this happened to me very recently. Henry Kissinger, the notable statesman, is famous, in sort of geopolitical circles. He popped up in the media recently making some statement about the ongoing virus pandemic. And I actually said, hang on a minute, Kissinger's dead. I said, Kissinger is dead. He died ages ago. He was really old. He wasn't looking too good. But apparently he's not. And I spoke to some other people about this, people who have an interest in these affairs. And I found at least one other person who knows a lot about this. And he said, yeah, I saw that. And I was convinced Kissinger was dead.
Yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about, yeah, and I've been guilty of it also, and I've actually seen sometimes a few people who are like film stars or actors and stuff like that who've been interviewed, and they've turned around and they've said that one of them actually said that he read his own obituary, in newspapers. Said, I'm still alive. I haven't gone yet, So.
Yeah, well,
That's
so
quite interesting. I think it was Clive James, actually. It might have been Clive James, because I know that he was like, he was ill for quite some time, and so I think they figured that he'd gone, and he hadn't. He was still around, so of course he was enjoying that because of his dry sense of humour, so.
Oh, there's a journalist colleague of mine, and one part of his job is he often gets asked for retrospective sort of life stories, obituaries basically, for notable people who die. So now people can die very suddenly. So one thing he has on file is a huge number of draft obituaries for people who are older and unwell.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
And he updates them, so if Celebrity X is on the watch list, so to speak, he'll have an obituary ready to go. And then if Celebrity X releases a new album or does a new film or as some other notable life event, he'll add that to the obituary. So it's basically ready to go. But anyway, my point was about your experience and how that stayed with you so profoundly, because it was such a profound experience. But there's other things you would think, well, surely there'd be life events that you would never forget the details of, but people forget details of births, marriages, funerals, things that you think you could never forget, and those things fade. And as far as dreams go, they can be very, very, very difficult to hold on to. This is perhaps the most basic difference between the experience you had in a dream. Some people who chronicle their dreams, and you know how important it is to get it down, to record it first thing afterwards, because even there's dreams experiences I've had that I felt that were unforgettable. They were absolutely shattering. And by lunchtime, they started to go, the details are starting to fade.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But not only that, they're just not, they fade, their importance fades as well. At first they are, because you think, wow, that was a really profound dream, and you just want to keep repeating it to people and stuff. But after a bit, you think, oh no, it doesn't really matter that much in your life, whereas like a near-death experience is so life-changing and so profound that for me, for example, it's become part of a huge part of my life. It's something that that I carry with me pretty much every day. Somebody asked me yesterday, I did an interview, and they said, "Oh, do you ever think about your NDE?" I was going, "Well, yeah, it's kind of like, because it's such a big change for me, it's such a big shift that I just I want to just talk about me and how it's changed my life because of me, but because I want other people to know about it, because it's right from the very off. That's what I wanted to do. I actually figured initially when I had my near-death experience, because I knew nothing about them, I thought I was the only person for it to happen to, which sounds very self-centered, but I didn't know. I didn't know anything about it. And so I thought the whole world has got to hear about this. And also, what is my quest? Why have they shown me this, and why have they sent me back and given me all this knowledge and this, so it's something that becomes very important to you. And, there are certain people I've come across, that have had near-death experiences and they've suppressed them, which I think it can't be a good idea, but that's life, isn't it? There's, it's like certain things happen to us in our lives that we suppress, that we shouldn't do, that we should really get in touch with. But yeah, for me, I decided that I wanted to address it straight away and continue to look into it and find out more about it and other people's experiences as well. So yeah, it's very, very much a part of my life. So, and if it was just a dream, it certainly wouldn't be. No, it wouldn't be that important to me.
No, because sometimes we have dreams that we feel are trying to tell us something, and there's a whole aspect of psychology devoted to analysing dreams, but people can get repeated messages through dreams, usually like in symbolic form, and either not understand them or misinterpret them or just brush them aside because they don't understand what the message is. In my experience, most dreams, however strange, are trying to impart some kind of information. It's some kind of feedback, even if it seems to be random nonsense. It generally isn't. It's just trying to interpret it. That it can be the difficult part. Now, as far as the near-death experience and telling other people goes, having read many accounts of it and also many books filled with accounts where the author does some analysis and interpretation, one of the most common things is simply that people don't want to be considered insane or that they're losing their minds by telling other people about this. And that has happened.
Mm-hmm.
I've spoken to near-death experiencers and read about some of them who've told their friends and family, and they haven't ostracized them, but they said, what are you talking about? You're out of your mind, and they don't like that. They don't like that. So of course they do try and write it off. But, and you just chalk it up to, like a sort of psychological event, a bit like a dream, and just say, yeah, well, that was strange. But it's clear from, reading about your experience, and it just backs up what I read, of others, is that this is something that you know it's important. And even if you wanted to, you couldn't suppress it. So for those, I think, who are quote unquote successfully suppressing something like this, I don't think they are really. It's going to find its way out somehow, even if it's like not visible, even if it's just through the difficulty of keeping something like that down. It's like some things need to come out, and they will come out one way or another.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It has to, most certainly. And I feel so. I mean, I think I met one guy when I was in hospital, and I remember I was in the physio sort of gym, as it were, in the hospital, and there was all amputees in there, and I told them my story when I was having a coffee break, and everyone heard it and listened through, and this guy came up to me afterwards, and he'd been in a high-speed chase. He'd been on a motorbike. It was a stolen bike, and and he was going 125 miles an hour and came off on the motorway and survived it. And he came up to me. He said, mate, that thing you were just talking about? I said, yeah. He said, that happened to me too. I was going, really? I said, have you talked about it? Have you said anything? He was going, nah. He said, all my mates would just think I was nuts, And he just kind of, there you go. And I kind of, to this day, I wonder whether he's got to the point where he's thought, no, I can't just sit on this any longer, or whether he's continued to suppress it, because it's such a massive event, and I just said, you've got to talk about it, you've got to, don't sit on it. But who knows? Yeah.
Some people are listening, especially if they've listened to the previous program, might be saying, okay, well, when are you going to talk about this event? So let's do that. In a way, I understand why last time when we spoke, we kind of didn't get round to this, because for me, I was much more interested in the transformation. But as I mentioned to you off air, I think if you do read a lot about near-death experiences and similar, you don't necessarily take them for granted, but you take certain things as given. So if I hear that somebody has a near-death experience, I'll be fascinated to hear about their experience, but then be more interested really in what has changed for them. But for those who, and we don't want to preempt your book, by the way, that's just to give an entire chapter out, but tell us something about the actual experience. You found yourself lying on a stone slab, basically, surrounded by beings, but there was of course, there was much more to your surroundings. So just tell us a little bit about that, and then about your sense of, your feelings and your sense of location, if you felt that you were anywhere in particular, or if there was any quality to any aspect of it that was really notable for you.
Well, initially, I'd gone from being in the A&E emergency department, and there was a lot of frantic sort of energy going on, because doctors were like flying around, all the science going above my head, and they were, I was losing a lot of blood, so they were trying to save me at that point. And also, hospital, we all know this, if you've been on a hospital trolley, the lights are just kind of really bright, and I just remember all that was overkill. And I went from that scenario and to what felt like, well, I thought it was a darkened room to start with, but when I say a darkened room, I mean like a really warm, sort of comforting darkened room, and it was like instantaneous that I'd gone from one place to another, but it wasn't like a sudden jolt. It was like a real sort of lovely transaction, and I instantly wanted to look around to find out where I was and get my bearings on everything. And I looked, and the first thing I noticed actually were these like pulsating lights that were slowly pulsating all around me. And I felt an instant sense of comfort from them. So I knew I was safe. I just knew it instantaneously that I was safe. But I also felt straight away that I had died. I thought I didn't make it. in the next stage, I'm dead. But there was no sense of fear or sort of anxiety and at all, and trying to hang on to life. I wasn't trying to sort of, trying to push myself back into my own body, back in the hospital. I was totally accepting as to where I was, and I was completely happy with it. Yeah, but the interesting thing was that I felt that there was somebody close to me at that stage. I felt that there was somebody there, a presence of someone, and that's when I looked, and through this darkness, I saw this beautiful androgynous being sort of just stood at my feet, wearing just like a simple contemporary black t-shirt, if you like, and this being was kind of, the skin was just kind of glowing. It was almost like a glow that was coming from inside, but it was a very contemporary human form as well, and nothing unusual or sort of like about it at all, other it. So it was very, but not only that, the face, and the expression on that face was, I felt like I knew that person, that being. I knew their face, and I felt this sense of comfort, and that I was being guarded and protected by this being. And it was like meeting my soulmate. It was like the ultimate soulmate that I'd known all my life and perhaps beyond, So I felt totally at ease, and I thought, okay, I'm safe here, and this is good, and death is not a bad thing at all. So what happens next, I wondered. So yeah, it was it was just, as I say, it was just a very comforting feeling, and and I laid my head back, and at that point I remember I looked up, and there were like 3 grids of white light that were like closing in on me. And when I looked into that white light, that's interesting as well, because the light was so bright that normally I wouldn't be able to look at it if it was electric light or sunlight. It just would be too bright and intense for me to look at. But I just couldn't take my gaze away from this light, because I felt that it was healing me. I felt that it was like sort of, it was helping me, not so much healing my wounds, my body, but my soul. And as I talked about earlier, from all the years of baggage that I carried, it felt like I was just being cleansed throughout, and it was just sort of getting rid of all that negative energy that I carried around with me. And then I decided to look at that point, just to check on my wounds, because my left arm had been severed from the elbow down. I remember seeing that, so I wanted to look and see how that was looking. And so I kind of lifted my head again and looked down, and I realized that I wasn't actually clothed anymore. But I was just covered in like this blue sheet. It was but this blue sheet was like a sort of very cool sort of satin sheet, and it felt very comforting. And I remember the light was just kind of like reflecting off these grids onto this sheet, and all my wounds were completely healed. Everything was intact. There wasn't even a single scratch. And so I just thought, wow, this is really beautiful. This is really amazing. And it was at that point I realized that I'd got 2 other beings had arrived either side, in female form. One of them to my right was just like long brown dark hair, and I remember his sort of green, sort of blue eyes, and quite sort of European look, I guess. And then the female to my left was more American Indian, or or sort of Asian Indian. I couldn't tell. I couldn't decipher between. But anyway, and she was hovering her hands over my body. In fact, they both were, and the hand, I've never had Reiki healing, but I've seen films and footage of it being done, and I thought, wow, that's just like what was going on with me. And their hands weren't actually touching me, but they were just kind of slowly hovering over my body. And the interesting thing was that I could feel this energy, this power coming from their hands, and it was like the energy was just like so strong. It was almost like I could feel every molecule in my body was just slowly vibrating. And again, I knew that I was being cleansed, and this energy was a sensation of love. It was like all the sort of sensations of love that you've had in your life and sort of condensed into one, whether it was the love of your mother, your father, your pet cat, or your girlfriend or boyfriend or partner or whatever. And it was all this sensation of love all condensed, and it was just like really powerful and very beautiful. So it was a sense also at that stage that I knew I was being prepared for something. I thought that they're getting me ready for something here, and I didn't know what. But I was quite happy with it, and there was no sense again of me fighting it. I was very accepting of that situation.
You said something in your book about the wider location. You mentioned stars, and that's very interesting because so far what you've described, people are probably envisioning you in a room of some sort.
That's exactly what I thought at first, but then I realised that wasn't the case, because what happened was I started thinking about my family, because my family had arrived in the A&E department and just before this happened, and before I left my body, as it were, and I thought they're going to be distraught. They were already in a pretty bad shape as it was. They'd just gone under the train, so I thought they're going to be really upset. But I didn't feel any sense of like, oh my goodness, my family. I just thought, oh, I'll see if I can see them. So I tried to look over the edge of this huge rock that I was on, and look down. And when I did look down, I didn't see them at all. But what I did see was this like remarkable sight. It was I could only describe it as being like, it was like a huge waterfall of stars, and the stars were like cascading over the edge and just kind of just falling down. And I thought, wow, look at that. It was like Niagara Falls, but it was stars, and they were just sparkling and just slowly flowing over the edge. And as I looked down, I just saw them dropping down, and they were just dropping with shooting stars through the middle. And it seemed like they were going into one galaxy to another. And then the further I looked, the more colours I could see, and and I could see that it was just dropping down into infinity. And so, of course, I knew at that stage that I wasn't in a small darkened room at all, that I was actually in the universe itself. So that was like a really wonderful moment. It just felt really beautiful, and it was just very exciting to know that I was there. And it's interesting because something that stayed with me now is the fascination for watching any programs on space travel and astronauts. I'm really keen to know what their take is on going into space and being out in the universe itself. And so it's interesting. And it's also interesting as well because watching some of those programs, I mean, these guys are scientists. I mean, they're the scientists of all scientists, so they'd have to be to go up and do that job. And many of them come back and they come back with a spiritual sort of take on life. It's changed them just being there in that space in the universe itself and coming back to Earth and re-entering. And so there's a lot of similarities. I think about that quite a lot, that the actual sensation of being in the universe itself is really remarkable.
That concludes part 1 of our interview. Part 2 will be available soon in the subscribers area at legalizefreedom.com.
legalizefreedom.com